Okay, hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I am so excited to be joined by Kendra Wright from Red Bull Media Agency. They are a full service marketing agency that works with financial advisors. You have seen Kendra on stages like Jolt, and she does a lot of speaking and education on places like LinkedIn and Instagram. And we're so excited too to be able to speak together this coming March at the Shift conference as well in Orlando. So, Kendra, thank you so much for being here today.
Hey, totally jazzed to hang out with you. I'm always excited to team up with you. I feel like in our industry, you're one of the most strategic people I know. And so I'm really excited to dig into these questions and bring two really different perspectives and two different expertises that also overlap.
Yeah, I'm excited as well. And why don't we just start with tell me a little bit about your firm, who you serve. Just I know that we'll have some audience overlap just so that people can meet
Yeah,
you.
absolutely. So yeah, I run a full service marketing agency in the finance space. So we work with financial advisors, a lot of like financial thought leaders, and most of our clients they come to us because they want really just one person and one team to manage all their marketing. They're busy and they need someone who is outrageously organized to take their marketing concepts from idea to done. So our agency is really unique in the fact that most marketers can think, which is strategy, or do, and 1% can handle both. And we are in that small realm of marketers who can take your ideas and bring them to life without a ton of handholding. You still have to be involved in the process, but it's a pretty cool structure that we have.
Yeah, no, and I have heard nothing but amazing things. I love when we are able to collaborate and overlap with clients. Kendra, for everyone out there, is just incredible. So we're really excited about today. How we're going to kind of structure this is everyone submitted questions. We kind of picked a couple to really focus on, and then if yours doesn't get featured today, don't worry, you'll get an individualized, personalized email from me with a quick answer, or a direct towards someone who else who can answer it better than I can, maybe. But we're just going to read them off and then kind of go back and forth and answer a little bit podcast style, a little bit mailbag style. I'm really excited. I love this sort of like casual coffee chat conversation vibe. So, that being said, let's go ahead and kick off with our first question. So, I'll go ahead and read it. So this
Awesome.
person sent in content planning and creation in general has me stressing lately, which haven't we all been there? What's a solid game
Yeah.
plan I can handle as a one-person marketing team for a group of advisors under one DBA or doing business as brand? So, Kendra, I know we both had some thoughts on this one. I'll let you take it away first.
Awesome. So if you're finding yourself overwhelmed, instead of asking, what should I be doing? The first thing you want to ask yourself is, what should you stop doing? Because marketing, what people don't realize is that the firms and advisors that are doing the best work out there are actually doing fewer things better. And so if you're just feeling that sense of overwhelm, I would start to looking at how can I start to like narrow my focus a little bit to where I feel like, okay, this is a challenging but achievable. Because I'd rather see you do a few things well than many things mediocre. And the next thing I would kind of start to look at from a strategic perspective, especially if you're working in an umbrella like that where you've got a handful of voices, but this also is a solo advisor advice as well, which is kind of like what are the platforms that you really want to leverage for your marketing channels? And so, for example, if you're good at writing or you're willing to get good at writing, you're going to be looking at platforms like LinkedIn, Twitter, SEO, also people who are willing to, hire people like you. You're great at writing and content and SEO. So you don't even have to be great at it. You just have to decide like, where do I want to win? If you're really good at speaking, you can look at platforms like podcasting, YouTube, public in-person events, and really just start to understand like, where do I have a competitive advantage? Because I'm already a good writer or a decent writer or a decent speaker, or I'm comfortable on video. Like you've really got to, because I see a lot of people go after platforms, they are just on the wrong platform. And we're all going to suck when we start. But if you can start somewhere that you already natively hang out or you already kind of feel like it's focusing in on the skill that you have, that's a great place to really begin. And then I would start to really outline a simple game plan for whatever channels you're choosing. So, for example, let's say you were going to go after LinkedIn, and then you determine like, what is my content posting schedule? What are the key metrics that I want to track? And like, I mean, literally, just keep it ultra simple, and also think about like, how consistent do you want to be? I think consistency is wildly under talked about in great marketing, because consistency is where we find enough information and data to make true strategic decisions. But most people are kind of throwing noodles at the wall everywhere. So I'd rather see you on few platforms more consistently and higher quality. And most people that are stressed out are just trying to do so many things at once. And then when you start to look at working with creatives or visionaries, it sounds like if you're in a firm where you're kind of pulling a bunch of brands together, you're probably hired because they want you to execute. So one of the things that I do with our clients is instead of waiting on them to give me content, I'll interview them. So I'll jump on a Zoom and I'll literally just run through questions I have about their expertise, about their talent, about different things and way they think about strategy. And then I'll create content off of that. So you might be waiting on other people to give you what you need, and how can you remove that kind of bottleneck from them, and batch the content as well. I think we jump around a lot. If you can batch a month of LinkedIn content or a month of Twitter content or email content, you really start to become way more effective because you can look at things strategically. Like, all right, cool. Every Monday we send this and that, and that becomes really effective. And the last thing I'll say is, most of us are nowhere near as good as we need to be on repurposing content. So a lot of times we're trying to create a lot of new stuff, and you've got some good hits in the bag that you can kind of pull out, you can add to, you can take a different angle, like look at what's already worked and how can you reuse it. So those are a few ways. If you're feeling really overwhelmed and you're kind of trying to herd a bunch of cats, that's where I would start to look at is, what can I take away? And then what's left, what am I really going to focus on? And then also, how can I get this content and information from them easier in a way that involves less of their time and attention?
I think that's so good. And I think too, for this question in particular, I've run into this a few times like in consulting. And what you had said, like, where do you want to win? I feel like that's so critical. It's like when you have a marketing team for a multi-advisor firm, maybe multiple offices,
Yeah.
even multiple locations, that's like, okay, like how the heck do I pull all of this brand together into one cohesive thing that's consistent for branding, messaging, all that stuff? But again, like limiting what you had said, limiting what you're doing. So focusing on what I call them as like your marketing hubs. Maybe it's LinkedIn, maybe it's
Yeah.
SEO, maybe it's like we're going to go hard on this podcast, or we want to blog twice, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Figure out what those hubs are, batch those hubs, right? It's like if it's podcasting,
Yes.
you're going to sit down and have podcast week. You're going to record as many episodes as you can smash in and look past at your, old calendars to figure out how can I repurpose that content as well. But again, maybe you're batching that, like you're updating past blog posts for increased SEO. So batch those hubs and then look at your advisors or your other offices as sort of like the spokes coming off of those hubs. So instead of you feeling like you have to do everything for everybody, saying, here's the content hub. Like we have our LinkedIn page for work or whatever, the situation might be.
Mm-hmm.
And then coach them on how to leverage that content to take it the next step. So it could be, all right, we're posting
Yes.
on LinkedIn. We post on LinkedIn 5 days a week or 7 days a week or whatever your goal is. Coach your other advisors and your other team members on how to help you move the needle further by saying, all right, you
Mm-hmm.
can repost, you can take this and riff off of it. Here's a spreadsheet with all of our past content bucketed into categories that you can post it to your own channels. Kind of coach them through how to help you repurpose it. And then they can learn the batching strategy as well. So then you're not in charge of everything for everybody. You're focusing on the key, like foundational points of the marketing and helping everybody else help you move the needle. So that's usually what I recommend for bigger firms.
Absolutely. And if you see, for example, like start looking at what are the issues that you bump up against? And for example, if one of them is not getting content in a timely manner, is it from one person or is it all people?
Mhm.
Because there are probably themes to what is happening in your marketing flow. Another good question. This is one that my coach gave me, and I love it. It's like, what's the least that you need from me to run with this? So sometimes
Mhm.
you're putting together all this information and people don't need that, especially if they're an expert in their field. So like, hey, I need, this content from you. And instead ask them, what's the least you need from me to rock this? And you'll be surprised what people can do. Sometimes you're actually hindering their progress by giving them too much information. So you have to really
Mhm.
understand the team and the personalities you work with. And I see everyone as a leader, even if you're managing up, you're a leader in your own business and your own job and your own role. And so from a leadership standpoint, I think about like, how do I become absolutely like elite at what I do? And one of those is like learning to manage other people. So there might even be some other components like that where you can be like, how do I get better at communicating this? How do I get better at keeping them accountable? So looking at from a high level, like what are the things you're bumping into over and over again? And then creating like a little mini project. Okay, the people aren't getting, things back to me in time. Okay, how can we fix that? Here's a couple strategies, and kind of working through some of those because we get so busy in the doing that we rarely stop to think, how do I make this whole process smoother? And you learn so much over time.
No, I think that's so fantastic. I think those are all really good nuggets too to just make a larger firm's marketing a little bit more manageable, a little bit more scalable, a little bit more strategic. So do we feel good? Do we feel ready to go to the next question?
Yeah, I
Okay,
think we're
great.
good.
So next one we've got is I post on LinkedIn consistently, but it doesn't seem to help increase my engagement or following count. What ideas do you recommend for actually growing a company's presence on LinkedIn?
There's so many thoughts here. How long do we have?
Right, right.
Okay, so I'm going to try and give you a crash course on my thoughts here. So first, let's zoom up. Before we get into the execution, let's talk a little bit about the strategy. So first, when it comes to even a social platform, the two questions I'm really asking myself and every client is, who are we trying to help? Getting really clear on who we're talking to, because you might just be talking to a lot of different kinds of people, and it makes the content you're posting a little bit hard to follow. Now, the thing about niching that gets a little hairy is like we all overthink it. So if you're not quite sure what your niche might be, or you're still struggling through that, just ask yourself, how do I get 1% clearer, 10% clearer? How do I just niche down slightly to get a little bit more clear on who I'm talking to? The second thing I would ask you is really, what are their problems? Because people don't care about your marketing. All they care about is what's in it for them and what you're solving for them. So, let's just say for me, I run a marketing agency. So the problems that people solve is exactly what we're talking about. How do I not feel so overwhelmed with marketing? That's a great piece, right? I could write about that. How do I build an email list? How do I, all these different pieces, like the things that people come to me and ask, those are their problems. And so I started to think about, okay, who am I serving and what problems am I solving? So that's a very high level. But once you kind of have your arms around that a little bit, that flows down into your day-to-day content strategy. So when we start to look at that in a little bit more of a strategic perspective, this question said, I'm posting content that I'm trying to grow a company's presence. And what I would say is, I think from a kind of internal employee perspective, and what I'm assuming on this role is first, company accounts do not get a lot of reach on LinkedIn. So
Mhm.
if you're comfortable, you're probably going to need to post from your personal account. People like to see people. We do business with people. And so if you can start there, using a personal account, you're going to get a lot more organic reach. And LinkedIn right now is pretty gangbusters on organic reach. Like you're getting
Mhm.
more organic reach on LinkedIn than most other social platforms right now. So you're in a good spot there for that. The other thing I would start to think about is a lot of LinkedIn experts are talking about how to develop strong opinions. So let me give you some examples of what that looks like. Right now, student loans are back with a vengeance. So we're all talking about how are we going to afford these student loans. If you were a student loan expert, you're going to sound like everyone else. A strong opinion, a boring opinion is student loans are back. A
Mhm.
badass opinion or like an interesting, strong opinion is student loans can be a great investment. Wow, you've got my attention
Mhm.
because I have a lot of student loans right now and that pain point hurts. Okay, let's talk about that. So if you're a student loan expert, that's a difference, right? So really looking at like, where can you package your content in like a really interesting, thought-provoking way? And if you sound like everybody else, you don't stand out. And so kind of developing your strong opinions, and those it can be the same 10 opinions, but you're going
Mhm.
to recycle, you're going to reuse, you're going to go to a different angle and really start to write from that perspective. I was thinking about something this morning and I was like, oh, everybody wants a big list. And my thought
Mhm.
process is you don't actually need a big list. What you actually want is an engaged list. So people talk a lot about building big lists, but I'm actually really interested in building small lists who are ridiculously engaged. That's an opposing opinion as a marketer, right? You don't need a big
Mhm.
list. That's going to catch a lot of people's attention instead of saying, well,
Mhm.
you need to build an email list. Well, no shit, Sherlock. We all know that. Okay. Can I say that on here? Okay.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yes.
I should have got that early disclaimer. Um, okay. So developing your strong opinions, and then let's think a little bit about some strategic pieces. And again, these can be outdated tomorrow, right? So a couple things is with LinkedIn specifically, you've got 3 spaces before the page break. So you've got to really learn to study copywriting and understand how to write a hook. That's a big piece that most people miss. And then also, you've really got to start to dive into what works on each platform. And LinkedIn, just like every other platform, is its own beast. So, for example, right now, something we're seeing happen is they're rewarding long, thoughtful comments. So start to
Mhm.
see your LinkedIn post. For example, I was just thinking about this analogy this morning, is like if you were playing basketball and if you shoot, like, let's just say from like right by the basket, that's like 1 point. And if you shoot from
Mhm.
halfway, that's like 2 points. And then all the way back is like 3 points. So the way I look at a LinkedIn post is like, if someone clicks your see more, you just shot 1 point into the bin, right?
Mhm.
If someone like clicks a like, that's like 2 points. And if someone leaves you a long, thoughtful comment or they repost your post, that's like shooting like a 3 pointer from way back, on
Mhm.
the court. And LinkedIn is looking at your points. And the people that are getting, people to open and expand their posts, they're getting them to like, they're getting them to leave comments, they're getting them to reshare. Those people are going to get the lion's share of their organic reach. And the thing that's really interesting that's happening on LinkedIn right now is like this content has more legs. Like this morning, I posted something last week and I got engagement on this morning. That is not
Mhm.
happening on other platforms. So, knowing these different strategic pieces, I would be thinking about how do I get really ultra tuned in on LinkedIn and learning from influencers who I think are just absolutely amazing at LinkedIn strategy. So, a couple LinkedIn strategists I personally love right now. Justin Welsh is amazing. Sam Brown is incredible. Dana Kavaluk. And then also Austin Church. He is not a LinkedIn strategist, but he is really advanced in his strategy. So following a few people outside of our space because it's notoriously behind and learning
Mhm.
from outside of the space is a great piece on that strategic element. And then the last thing I'll say from a LinkedIn perspective is you got to up your asset game. And I'm not talking about AUM. Okay. So we need to get like some serious high quality photos because most people are not going to do that. So, if you look at a handful of my posts that go out, there's definitely some native photos, which are just like things I snapped personally, and those can perform really good. Um, and then I also have a mix of a lot of times like my personal branding photos. And so I literally sat down
Mhm.
and I was like, what are the 20 things I might write about and what image would I need to go with them? And then I hired a photographer for a couple $100 and met him at a coffee shop. And I use those over and over and over again. And I've had multiple people comment on them. And I'll use those for the next 2 to 3 years. So that's the thing that's really interesting. And then as you do that, you can also keep a list as you start writing more content. What did I need that I didn't have? That becomes your second photo shoot. So those personal branding elements really also help you stand out because they're not stock and they're you, but they are like they pop. So those are a couple things from the LinkedIn level. Getting really clear on who you want to talk to, who you serve, um, posting on your personal account, developing your strong opinions, refining those, learning some of the deep strategic pieces, and then getting some personal branding photos. I think are like a good kind of bonus there. Not
That's
required, but they're helpful.
Yeah, that's so good. I tell a lot of my clients too, because a lot of them are like family people or they're like, I don't have time for like a personal branding shoot. And what I always say is like, hey,
Yeah.
like level it up and like double dip. Like have it be a family photo session. Your partner is gonna love that because like you get some family photos
Yeah.
for whatever for around the house. And then take some personal shots too of just like you with the
Yes.
computer. Like maximize your time. Like there's no reason you can't stack that sort of thing. Like you're getting shots for your business. You're also getting shots for like we just did it for us personally. I'm using those pictures. They're on my walls right now. They're on social media. We're sending them to
Absolutely.
grandparents. Like, get the most bang for your buck there for sure. If you're going to do a photo shoot, go all in. I think, Kendra, you hit the nail on the head with a lot of this. The only other component that I had on my notes that maybe like we didn't cover was you get with social media what you put in. So like you're saying like,
Yes.
long thoughtful comments,
Mhm.
like you get those long thoughtful comments from people when you put long thoughtful comments out too on other people's posts. So like
Yes.
pick your influencers, pick the people in the space who you want to get to know better, who you feel like, okay, like I just really respect their work, or man, they have a
Yeah.
strong opinion that I feel like I agree with. And then focus on, I tell a lot of our consulting clients, like 5 to 10 minutes every morning. Pick about when you're about
Yes.
to post, and then you can go ahead and jump in and say, all right, my post is scheduled for 9 a.m. And this is just like a little strategy thing
Yep.
that I do personally. At 8:30, I'm gonna get in, I'm gonna leave 3 comments, I'm gonna like at least 3 posts, and I'm gonna send someone a message. Then you will be
Yeah.
mind blown. It also is nice too, because then if people do comment on your posts, like you have set time every day to like address those comments and
Yes.
respond. Because social media is social and people do buy for brands, or
Yes.
they don't, sorry, they buy people, not brands. So building up your personal brand that way is so key. And I think a lot of people, especially if you're posting from a brand account, don't think about it that way. But yeah, moving
Yeah.
to a personal account, so just your brand account, resharing company posts, using the personal branded images. I love all of that. And just trying to figure out how can I actually make social media fun and engaging. And that way you will also get fun engagement on your profile as well.
Yeah, I love what you said there. And two things that come to mind. One is some people think, well, I don't want to have a personal brand and I'm here to deliver bad news. You've already got one. The
Hmm.
question is, are you going to control it? Everyone's already got an online public persona. And that doesn't
Hmm.
mean that you're going to become an influencer with like a YouTube camera walking around. But
Yep.
even one great quality post a week can really go a long way. And the other thing I was thinking about is from a mindset perspective is like, go to social media to give, not get. And your
Hmm.
experience will be totally different. If you go there and you're ultra salesy and instead of curious and there to solve problems and answer questions, you're gonna have a different experience and it's not gonna be fun
Hmm.
because the mindset that people are in when they're on social is not to be sold to. They want to be entertained, they want to be educated, they want to be inspired. So that's what they're looking for there. They're not looking to find a financial advisor while they're scrolling LinkedIn. Nobody wakes
Hmm.
up. My friend Ruben says, nobody, I think it's Ruben, he says, like nobody wakes up looking for a financial advisor, right? Like they usually have some kind of pain point. So you know that. And instead of arguing against the reality, learn to play the game, become curious, go to give. You know, if you give enough in a quality, true way, you will get something back. But it takes time. And again, I think the most underrated element of marketing that nobody talks about and everybody needs is consistency. So this element of, yeah, schedule your posts to go live at 9 a.m. and then you jump on every morning and you respond to comments and you give back and you interact with a few people strategically goes a long way. You're ahead of 90% of people already on LinkedIn.
100%. Yes. No, I think those are all really, really good tips. So, all right, next question we've got here. Here we go. Okay. What are the key differentiators that can make an advisor's marketing strategy more effective than their competitors? And I had a lot of thoughts on this one, but I'm going to let you dive in first.
Yeah. What do you want to go first? Because
Sure. So I just liked it because I was
I'm
able to
excited to hear
like boil it
yours.
down into like a catchphrase, which I think is just helpful for people to
Yeah.
remember. So like when you're thinking about key differentiators for your marketing, what I kind of wrote down was think about who you serve, how you serve, and who you are. And those three things will ultimately inform the rest of your marketing strategy to really help you be consistent. Consistency is like a key for this conversation. It sounds like it's like the
Yes.
buzzword we have, but because when you're consistent with how you show up, who you are, how you serve, and what your brand looks like, those are your key differentiators, whether or not someone else also works with physicians or, whatever else it might be. And I
Right.
firmly, like, I just don't believe that, like, oh, I'm on LinkedIn and that's my differentiator. Like,
Right.
okay,
Oh,
but
God.
really what sets you apart is the fact that, like, you are you and you have this very unique brand voice. And if you're consistent with it, that's what's going to draw people
Yeah.
in. So it's kind of what I had
Yeah.
was who you are, who you serve, and who you serve, how you serve, and who you are.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think um, really knowing what makes you unique, even though you can be similar, is really
Hmm.
helpful. So, for example, when I talk about how we serve clients, I'll use myself as an example so people can see what that looks like, how that
Hmm.
drives through in marketing. So, when I step back and I ask, who am I? So, my background is I used to work in rock and roll, and
Hmm.
I was in rock and roll from the age of like 16 to like 25, 15 to 25, like pretty wild. At 18, I was touring the country with rock and roll bands. So, when I ended up, starting my own agency and ending up in finance, I had to really ask myself, am I going to bring the rock and roll kid with me? Like, like I have a vibe, I have a persona. Like, you can take the girl to rock and roll, but you can't take the rock and roll out of the girl, is what I learned. And so
Hmm.
I just decided to embrace it, right? And so when I was speaking at Future Proof like a month ago, someone called me like the rock and roll kid of like financial marketing, and I was like,
Hmm.
yes, like that is so me. And I had to make a decision. And one of like the best quotes I've ever heard about business is you found a business value when you're willing to lose money over it. So what are you willing to lose money over in your business? And that's a
Hmm.
part of who you are. So for me, I was like, um, I get a little spicy with my language. I'm a little fun. I'm a
Hmm.
little different. I have strong opinions, but like I try to hold them loosely. I talk kind of funny. Like I use words like bonkers and bananas and like just things that like make me chuckle. And those are all parts of my brand. So if you go to my website, I don't talk a lot about AUM. or really technical pieces, because I just think it's freaking boring. Okay. Even though most of my clients are in that space, it's very lighthearted, it's very easy to understand, it's very clear. And so for
Mm.
me, that's how who you are drives through everything else. So I'm not ever going to put out anything that sounds ultra stuffy. Like there's an element of approachableness and friendliness that's
Mhm.
important to me. And so when we think about how does who you are drive down to like what your LinkedIn posts look like you can go look at my LinkedIn posts. I say kind of quirky things. And so I think that knowing who you are is really, really important, for sure. When I think about, you know, the key differentiators that make an advisor's marketing strategy more effective than their competitors, we kind of touched on this prior, but again, this is kind of what I come back to. They do less things better. So one of my like side hobbies is I love to find the highest performing advisors in our space and then ask them over coffee or drinks or over Zoom, hey, what's working in your firm right now? I'm obsessed with it. I want to know. And so
Mhm.
I found these advisors who have like wait lists and who are growing, very well. And I go straight to them and I'm like, what's working? And honestly, every single one of them, what they have in common is they're doing less things better. So they've chosen one or two platforms and they went really deep. And now, what you don't see is that sometimes you might see an advisor who's doing well and they have, let's just say, two or three platforms. But if you talk to them behind the scenes and you can get them to be honest with you, they'll tell you, well, yeah, like, one advisor I have in mind, they started on LinkedIn because that's where another advisor told them like to start. And that didn't really work for them. And then they jumped over to Twitter and then they like found their pace, they found their speed, and they crush on Twitter. And then now that same advisor is starting to expand into YouTube. And so, but they weren't into YouTube 2 years ago, and Twitter and LinkedIn. And then also LinkedIn is not a major focus for that advisor, even though they're present there. It's really just a
Mhm.
content repurposing strategy. So it's decent, you know, it's okay, but they're really repurposing the content they write from Twitter onto LinkedIn, and now they're jumping into YouTube. So the whole strategy really started, the foundation was built through one platform that worked for them, and then they slowly branched out. So, choosing those one or two platforms. And then the second thing is you've got to know what you're measuring. And most people want to have like this giant spreadsheet. And the philosophy I like is don't pull data you won't use. So really, you might need 3 to 5 metrics max. And one of the metrics you're not thinking about is consistency. So for example, if your goal is to post 12 or 3 times a week on LinkedIn, so you want 12 posts to go out every month, how many posts did you get out that month? That impacts all your downstream metrics. Other metrics can look like impressions, comments, how many followers, how many conversations, how many quality conversations did you have?
Mhm.
Choose the 3 to 5 metrics, and then you've got to truly commit. Um, if you're not willing to commit to a consistent posting schedule for at least a year on any platform, don't start. Don't start, because even if you're good, you probably will take a while to get great, or at least good enough
Mhm.
to get noticed. And so to me, I think, doing less, choosing one or two platforms, getting really clear on the couple of metrics you're going to track, and then a clear commitment of doing it for a year. Like it's so simple, but the best marketing is simple. We want this shiny tactic or this exciting thing. But the thing is, like, that tactic, it might work. But when that tactic changes, that whole strategy changes. So really, you've got to have that foundation, that you're building upon. It's like, yeah, I'm really focusing on LinkedIn or Twitter or YouTube. Here's what I'm measuring. Here's how long I'm committed to, and here's what I'm looking back. I'm looking at my info like once a month. And now, oh, there is a new strategy for YouTube. I can try that, but not at the risk of my other metrics and getting those things done. And then the other two that I would add, these are kind of like bonus mindset pieces when I look at the key differentiators of the advisors that are doing well. Um, One is, how do you become elite at what you do? So there are
Mhm.
average podcasters and there are awesome podcasters. And the difference is a mindset. So the average podcaster is like, great, how do I get a few guests on the show? How do I get this thing published? How do I not stutter a lot? Elite
Mhm.
podcasters, they start to ask questions like, how do I get better headlines on my podcast titles? How do I get better guests? How do I get the guests nobody else can get? How do I make my show unique or different or entertaining or funny or deep? Or how do I become more of who I am on the show and like amplify that? Right. So if you're going to post on LinkedIn, ask yourself, how do you become elite at LinkedIn? And what would somebody who is elite at what they do? I ask myself this question all the time as a strategist, as a business owner. And you know what I do? I go for walks around my block and I listen to leadership podcasts. I was just traveling Europe and it was early in the morning and I was walking home, carrying my groceries, listening to a podcast about LinkedIn algorithms. That is what, people who are trying to be the best at their craft do. And the second thing I'll add from mindset perspective is just like know what you're going to say no to. Literally, I have a list of the things I am actively struggling to say no to. And I read it every morning. And when I don't read it, I was traveling for a month. I didn't read it. I just read it again for the first time this morning. I was like, oh, snap. I just did 3 of the things I was trying not to do. I cannot believe this. But then I was like, oh, I'm not reading my no list. So know what you're going to say no to and aim to be great at one platform versus mediocre at many.
I think that's so good. And I think a lot of times when I talk to advisors about like defining differentiators and like what, and I'm interested to hear your opinion on this, I get a lot of the same questions, which is things like, what if I'm trying to rank for a certain keyword? Like, should I rank for fee only in, I don't know, like Boise, Idaho? I'm only using that because I don't have any clients there.
Right.
So I
Yeah.
won't use that city.
Right.
Or should I like try like what's gonna like differentiate me for other people? And in that case, I think the clients who we've had for consulting or fractional CMO sort of work that have truly like killed it, like they're knocking it out of the park, both because we're strategizing with them, but also because like they're implementing, is they're listening to their clients. Like they're thinking about their
Yes.
A-lister clients, the people they want to serve. So going back to that who you serve kind of component, who you are and how you're serving them well. And they're trying to copy and paste. For like they're like, okay, these are the
Yeah.
clients who if I could fill my whole calendar with them, I would be happy. What do they want? Where are they showing up online? And then they're consistent with
Yes.
those things. So and sometimes it's surprising, right? Like we had a client send out a survey, which just, side note, send a survey to your clients if you haven't, just asking them
Yes.
like, where are you? How often do you want to hear from me? Like, what do you want to learn about? Because they're going to be your biggest fan base and like help you grow organically.
Yes.
So talking to them, and this client was like, I think that they all really want to learn more about retirement. Unanimously, it was leaving a legacy and tax planning, nothing to do with retirement. It's like they had been creating the wrong
Fascinating.
content and didn't know. And so, like, again, figuring out who you serve, even if it's just looking at your current client list and saying, hey, if I only served Bobby and Sue, I would be happy for the rest of my life. Great. Like,
Yes.
let's go ahead and figure out what they want and then figure out how to create content around that. And that'll be a differentiator for, again, copying and pasting those A-list clients.
Absolutely. And if you don't have your ideal client list yet, but you've identified them, say you're moving into a target market or you're trying to niche down, you can also learn from other people's clients. What are other people talking about?
Mm-hmm.
Read forums online. Like what language are they using? People don't talk about, yeah, most people, I'm really excited about tax loss harvesting. No, the language they use is I'd like to pay less in taxes, or I'm
Mm-hmm.
earning a lot more money and I'm not seeing that. Like I'm not keeping it.
Mm-hmm.
How do I reverse that? How do I keep more of what I earn? And so really, one of the things people don't realize, especially in the financial advising and financial world, because we're so technical and we're so advanced there, that the most effective copy on the internet is written at a 6th grade level.
Oh,
So
yeah, absolutely.
the simpler you can keep it, there's a tool called Hemingway. You can run your copy through your email campaigns, your social posts, and it'll highlight in red if it's called the Flesch Kincaid score is above a 6th grade level. And I think I've like watered it down to be easy to digest, and a lot of times, even though I'm very aware of it, it will catch things. And so the thing that's really difficult about when you start looking at what do your best clients want and need, a lot of advisors struggle to create content that caters to that because they might be afraid that they will be judged as not intelligent or advanced enough.
Mm-hmm.
But the goal should really be how do I become helpful, not how do I
Yes.
sound smart?
Yes.
Because
I
that's
had
the
someone
ego
once tell
shift.
me they wanted to use $10 words in their blog posts. And I was like, I just like, is that going to get anyone anything other than like, okay, yes, maybe your article is going to sound like very like well educated. Like you can sound that way and still teach people actionable advice. Like, and so, anyways, I just think that's such a good point. Is like making sure that you're writing at the
Yes.
level that people want to consume content at.
I think the best marketers are the people that can explain what they do and how they help without confusing a single person in the room, no matter
Mhm.
what their skill sets are. So yeah, I totally agree on that.
Yeah, totally with you. Well, let's jump to our next question here. We've got two more. So, all right, let's see. Differentiators. The next one. I feel like I've fallen into the education trap because I'm comfortable here, writing about topics that I get good feedback from readers on, but limited engagement or follow up to initial appointments. How do I escape that or create more compelling calls to action? And I think we've all kind of run into this at some point in our, whether you're a financial advisor or, I mean, I've run into it as a marketer. So I'll let you
Absolutely.
dive in.
Absolutely. Yeah, so I think first you need to expand what you consider a call to action, because most of us, especially in the financial, realm, in the little world that we all live in, the call to action everybody cares about is a call booking. And the reality is, a very, very small percentage of people are ready to talk to you about handing over their life savings. They might be ready to talk to you about a few other things, but they might be willing to, answer a question or reply to an email or forward this podcast to a friend or tag someone who might enjoy this content. But there are way more calls to action than most people consider. And so first I would experiment with expanding your calls to action. I'm not sure which platform we're talking about here. The next thing is I would expand your mindset. Instead of aiming for sales calls, aim for conversations. So be more curious. I think that most, there's a small percentage of people who are willing to just book a call, but then for the rest of them, they have a warm potential where they could be interested if they really understood or could have a little bit more conversation with you, or you could solve a problem for them. So I really encourage our clients, if they're on different platforms, to really just start a conversation, actually be in the comments and spending time responding, not just firing off something mindless. Show them that you care before they pay you a penny, and you'll get a lot more people willing to hand you some dollar bills. Because
Mhm.
that's the thing, right? At the beginning of the relationship, we're on our best behavior. We'll do the most that we can to, help people. And it's like, you got to show them that you're willing to help them. I spend a
Mhm.
lot of time even just on LinkedIn, like people ask me questions and I send them, I have some people who send me messages on LinkedIn and I will literally fire up. There's a great tool called Loom that you can use, and I'll answer their question over video. Now, I understand from a compliance perspective, you might not be able to give specific advice, but you could show them an example of, hey, this is what a Monte Carlo looks like. Here's what could happen. Dave Zoller has some good content on this, where he did this a lot, I believe, on the YouTube front. People will reach out and he would send them a quick walkthrough, and he had kind of a template that he would walk people through on how some of the tools work and how some of the planning works. So there are ways to explain how you help that are compliance friendly, absolutely. And then the other thing is, from a content perspective, I think an area that we're all absolutely underskilled at is better storytelling. So I heard this quote a long time ago from, I think it was James Altucher, and he said, if you're about to press publish on something and you don't feel a little nervous, you haven't put enough heart and soul into it. And I think that's a really fancy way of saying, like, put a little bit of who you are into this. Share a story, share something that people can connect with emotionally. Because um, really, people, although logic is involved, so much of sales is actually an emotional decision. So if you can connect people on an emotional level, that's a great way to start. So yeah, I think focusing on the the conversation element over the sales. I would also expand what you consider a call to action. I would even maybe ask a few of the people, if you know someone who's consumed the content, like, hey, what do you think this needs to be better? Or also, one of my favorite things is I look at, what do I respond to? So if you're looking at, oh, I want more LinkedIn comments, I'd be like, okay, I study myself like a little lab rabbit. I'm like, okay, what did I want to comment on and why? Anytime I go to take an action online, I'm like, there's a little scientist in me that's like, why do I want to comment on this LinkedIn post? I'm like, oh, that question is really good. What is it about that question that's really good? How could I take that concept or that idea or that angle and apply it to my own post? So I'll keep lists of like prompts that I see, posts that I see, formats that I see, calls to action that I see. I have like a big swipe file of like mega nerd stuff. And I'm just always learning, like always kind of refining, always trying to get a little bit better. But if there's some calls to action you see working, stop and ask why.
I love that. And I think similar to what you're saying, the first thing I thought when I saw this question was, I think there's a hole in your funnel. Like if you feel like you've got high
Yeah.
quality educational content that's getting engagement and you're not getting bookings, Like there is a missing piece somewhere where you're losing
Yep.
leads out of the side of the funnel because someone's drilled a hole in it. So
Yeah.
my first thought was expanding the calls to action idea.
Yeah.
So like if you're
I
just
love that.
saying schedule a call, book 15 minutes on my calendar, obviously that's where the conversion is going to happen. We want to get people there, but you're probably missing a layer. So like to your point, look around at
Yep.
what you're willing to engage with online. More often than not, you're not scheduling the consultation for, I use a very like super random example, but something that I just did recently was like, okay, we want to get Christmas lights hung this year. We've got twin preschoolers.
Yeah.
We've never done it before. We've always just done it ourselves. And I was like, I want to do it big, like really get them excited about it.
Yeah.
Like I love the way their faces light up when they see holiday lights. And so I was like, okay, like I'm gonna interview around and kind of see. And then I got nervous because I was like, well, what if the quotes are way too high? And like I freaked out, right? I didn't book the
Yeah.
call. But someone had like a goofy Reddit style quiz on their website about like what holiday light style is best for you. And I was like, oh, this is so fun. And it was
Love
like a
it.
good way to kill 5 minutes. And so I was willing to engage with that content and give away my email address for free. More than likely, I'll end up booking with them because they already have my contact info. And so as a marketer with my marketing hat on, I'm like, they got me. Like they got me into their funnel because I wasn't ready
Yes.
to book a call. I was ready to give up my email address. That's harmless. I mean, everyone has that, right? So
Yeah.
like easy peasy. So if you don't feel like you're getting enough call bookings and if something is amiss because your educational content is getting good feedback from clients or whatever else, those
Yeah.
A-lister clients we talked about earlier are loving it. You probably need like a softer yes. But like so something that people can
Yes.
show they've got some skin in the game, whether that's like you said, forward this to a friend for your current clients, or maybe it's tag someone who's interested in this post for a LinkedIn sort of thing. If it's a blog, we even have clients who, I mean, you can hate or love pop-ups. Statistically, they work. But
Absolutely.
if you don't love pop-ups, a lot of times we'll design like a custom graphic and embed it in a blog post that's like clicks
Yep.
out to a sign up form or something, or maybe there's a sign up form right under it, like, hey, sign up
Absolutely.
for our quiz or take this ebook guide, whatever you have that's your soft yes. And this doesn't have to be like rocket science either. Like you can take something you already have and repurpose it. Or like if you've got 10 blog posts on a Roth IRA, that sounds like you could send it to an editor and make it an ebook. Like that's pretty straightforward.
Right.
Leverage what you've already got to get that softer yes in order to get more nurtured leads to get them to that conversion
Yes.
eventually.
I love this concept between the hard yes and the soft yes, because most of
Hmm.
us want the hard yes, and that's exciting and that's great. But the
Hmm.
practicality is that most people are not a hard yes. So how do we get a soft yes? I
No,
love that
yeah.
concept. I think that's
Hmm.
wonderful.
And
The
unfortunately,
soft
like for
yes was the
better or
quiz.
worse, yes, and like I mean, for better or worse, advisors are not in a time bound situation, right? Like it's not like, okay, if I want holiday lights hung, I've got a month, right? Like I need to get on it. But
Right.
like most
Right.
people who are like, okay, student loans are stressing me out, or gosh, I'm gonna retire in
Yep.
5 to 10 years. They're not waking up with a fire under their butt, like, okay, like I need to get someone to talk to me about my 401k right now. Like that's not happening unless
Yeah.
there's something very clear, like an IPO or something driving that time bound sort of factor. So
Hmm.
having a soft yes available allows you to nurture them until they are ready. And a lot of times, I mean, for our own list, for lists of our clients, like people have been on a list for 3 to 5 years before they reach out. And then they're like, hey, I followed you for forever. Can't even tell you where I first found
Right.
you because you've been around for so long. That's the sort of information and consistency you want. And that's why that soft yes in your funnel matters.
Absolutely. And, the one thing that is unique about the advising space is that because there aren't these often hard deadlines, it is a little more challenging to drive people to action. What you can do is leverage kind of what in the marketing direct response world we would call something like headline jacking, which is, for example, let's talk about student loans. So, hey, student loans are going to start back on this date. We could create compelling content around that. And so, technically still it goes after that, but it's a pseudo deadline. End of the year is huge. For our clients, we do call booking campaigns around this time of the year where people are like, hey, I know you're not thinking about your taxes right now, but actually the best work to do on your taxes starts now. So we need to get you on the calendar before November 1st if you want to, greatly reduce the tax liability and the bill that you pay, right? And so
Mhm.
that again is not an absolute hard deadline. I mean, they could reduce their taxes next year, but if you can find those simple things, those simple headlines. I've seen another one recently where there were some things going on in politics and it was going to impact some tax cuts and things like that. And so we sent the campaign around that. And so that's one way you can start to leverage, what's happening in the world and what's happening with seasonality. to drive a little bit more of that call to action and that deadline that's often out there.
So good. I love that. Well, let's move to our final question of the day. And I think this one might be my favorite question. So it's, I know having a growing opted in email list is key, which kind of ties into what we just talked about, but how do I build one from scratch?
You go first on this one because you're excited about it. I want to hear what you have to say.
Well, I had a couple of notes. And then I have some questions for you because questions I get all the time. I just went to the NAPA conference last month and I got questions about this there too. So I think a couple of things with your opt-in list. I think make it clear, right? So if you're advertising something, whether it's paid or you're just like have it on your website as a free resource, make it super clear what people are getting when they give you a soft yes. So if they're gonna put their email address in, make it like, okay, you're getting this guidebook and this is exactly the transformation you will experience when you're going to hit the end of it. Or when I took the holiday lighting quiz, I figured out that I'm a whatever, right? Like I like colorful, cozy, like 90s lights, which is a little embarrassing, but that's fine. And so
I love that.
hey, it is what it is. I like jolly stuff. So like make it super clear like what the takeaway is going to be for them. And then make how you market it clear as well, right? So like you sign up, make it super simple. A lot of advisors who I talk to are like, well, I want a phone number and I want to know minimal investable assets. And I'm like, man, you probably just want an email address. Like even first name, last name, iffy. Like they may or may not fill it out. So in this world of instant gratification, people don't want to give you all of the information during that soft yes. So make it super simple, make what you're marketing really clear for whatever the takeaway is that they're going to get. And then the other things that I had were make it relevant to your audience. So make sure that, you know, if you've got, again, those A-list clients that you could copy and paste, what questions did they have when they walked through your door? Was it, okay, like student loans are stressful, I want to plan for retirement, I've got kids and I want to build a legacy? Answer those questions because those are the same questions that people you've not talked to have. And then finally, like make it as interactive or actionable as you can. So I don't love like very long ebooks, for example, unless you know exactly what it's going to be, like that your audience really wants that for some reason. Make it a checklist that's included or an interactive quiz, like something that people can engage with a little bit. Otherwise, it's just less like they're going to ask for the content and then they're never going to read it. We've all done this. We've downloaded a white paper and then it's sat in our inbox for forever. You've added it to a file like, I'm going to get better about my student loans someday, and then just didn't touch it. So I do it all the time. Or like you sign up for the webinar and don't attend, like whatever it is. So make it as actionable as you can so you actually get the engagement and pull them further into your funnel. So those are my big takeaways.
I love it. I think those are all great. I love the specificity because if you had went to this Christmas lights website and they're like, hey, learn about, you know, what wrapping paper colors, you know, you might like this year. You're like, kind of a line, but like, I'm not really interested in wrapping paper. I need some lights.
I'm not here to buy that. Yeah, exactly. 100%.
Right, exactly. And so that's the difference, you know, kind of, I think when we zoom out into other industries, it's easier to see how that applies, right? So, you know, if you're kind of going after, let's just say, tech, but then you had a lead magnet that was for women and most of your people are not women, that's a mismatch. You know, it's great for certain audiences, but not who you're trying to really serve. And so I think I love that specificity. So I'm going to take a little bit of a different angle because I think you gave some really good tactical pieces. So I'm going to take a little bit of a more philosophical mindset piece. And the reason why I think this is important is because tactics matter and mindset matter. I literally had this conversation with someone like 2 days ago. Mindset is below the tactics. So mindset is, how do I get myself to be consistent? Or how do I tamp down my fear of putting myself out there? And tactics is, how do I get post the best performing content on LinkedIn? Mindset is how do I react when nobody responds, right? So they're very important. I think there's a place for marketing mindset and there's a place for marketing tactics. And this is kind of an area that I've been thinking about lately, is like marketing mindset. And so when it comes to really like an email list, the thing I think about is like, you actually don't want a big email list. What you actually are looking for is an engaged email list. So that's a mindset shift. And also like you need a challenging but achievable goal, because if you have 0 people in your email list and tomorrow I come to you and I'm like, all right, you've got to build a list of 5,000 people. That is just like outrageous. Like it's too far out, right? And so what I often tell people, even if they're wildly talented, how about we set a challenging but achievable goal? And if you have 0 people in your email list or you're brand new, that could look like 100 people. It could like 50 people, whatever that is for you. So then it starts to feel a little bit more like, okay, I got some ideas on how I get to 100, because the thing about an email list is the strategies that get you from 0 to 100 are different from the strategies that get you from like 100 to 5,000 to 10,000
Yes.
to 100,000. I have worked with people with email list of 0 to literally hundreds of thousands of people on their email list. And the
Mhm.
strategies that work on the high end of the spectrum, absolutely different than the low end of the spectrum. So if you have 0 email list, I would set a really simple goal, like 50 to 100 subscribers. And then let's get really scrappy here. So this is a little bit more of the tactical piece. First, what you need to know is you cannot add people to your email list who have not agreed or approved for you to add. And you don't want to do that anyway, because you don't want somebody on your list who doesn't want to hear from you. That actually impacts your deliverability rate. And so it's better to have people there who want to hear from you, and an unsubscribe is not bad. The more engaged the list is, the better. The second thing I like to think about is like, um, you know, people really wildly underestimate like really manual reach out. Let's say you're having a great conversation with someone on LinkedIn and they look like they're a potentially qualified candidate, and you and I are having a conversation, and Zoe, you're thinking about, hiring someone to help you through marketing, and I'm answering a few questions, and it gets to the point where it's like, yeah, they're not quite ready to take that next step. I could say, hey, you know what? We've had an awesome conversation here. I really love what you're up to. And just so you know, a lot of the questions you asked me here, I actually answer a lot of questions just like this every week on my email list. Would you be open to me just popping your email on? If so, just shoot me your email address. It's very
Yep.
simple, but that's how you go from 0 to 25, 0 to 50.
Mhm.
Also, don't discount the power in in-person events. And like, I went to an art show recently. One of my favorite things to do is look at other industries and what's working and how we can apply it to
Mhm.
finance. So I went to an art show recently in Seattle, and one of my friends is a painter, and she at her like art booth at this art fair, she had a QR, or she had like a sign up list is what it was. And
Mhm.
she had like a promotion there that if you signed up for her email list, you got a free postcard, which was like a mini sample of her work.
Mhm.
And I was like, this is awesome. I love this. And it,
Mhm.
it was actually very effective. So every person she chatted with, even if they didn't buy art, she would just say, hey, by the way, since you stopped by, I'd love for
Mhm.
you to take a piece of my art. If you're open to it, I have an email list sign up here. Just add your info. I did list, and then you get like a little beautiful postcard to take with you. And it worked really well.
Mhm.
And so those kind of pieces and those like similar, like simple kind of guerrilla style tactics, especially when you got nothing going on, do not stress too much about these fancy tactics. Like you can get really scrappy with it, and that can work really well. So that's kind of what I would look at. If you're starting to get a little bit more advanced, something that people don't talk about often that I think is under leveraged is what's called a list swap. So let's say you have a center of influence that you've built a really great reputation with. They send you a great quality clients, and the people that they send you would love the content you put out. You could reach out to an accountant or somebody and say, hey, by the way, I just put together this spreadsheet, this template of all the key numbers someone needs to know in a budget. Would you be open to doing a list swap where I email my list about a resource you have or your services, and you'll do the same? And the thing is, you want to drive them to a landing page to opt in. You don't want to include the budget template in the email. You want to gate it behind something to where they have to put their email list in, and that way you also won't have to do a list. The back end like manual labor of getting the email addresses. You just like,
Mhm.
hey, by the way, we have this budgeting template for tech entrepreneurs. It's a spreadsheet, and this certified financial CFP gave it to us, etc. You do a simple lift
Mhm.
swap, and I think the thing to keep in mind here is it needs to be someone who's at a similar route or a similar point on the route of their email list growth. If you've got 50 people, you're not going to email someone with 5,000 people and be like, hey, can we do a list swap? Like, no, maybe they have 100 or
Mhm.
75, or you guys are kind of close. That's who you want to find to do something like a list swap.
No, I think that's great. And we tell a lot of our consulting clients, like everyone who hears like, you want to fill the seats on the bus. Or like in your firm, you can work with 50 families or
Yeah.
100 families or whatever it is. You want to fill those seats on your bus. Like it's so much better to just borrow somebody else's already full bus and see if you can drive for a little bit.
Yes.
And so like whether it's a list swap, or we have a lot of our clients who will do like webinars like this, where like, okay, I'm going to meet with an estate planning attorney and we're going to kind of interview each other about financial sides of estate planning versus legal, or answer some
Absolutely.
specific questions, or sometimes they'll even do like co-branded client events where they're like, I'll invite
Love
mine
it.
if you invite yours, sort of a thing. And they'll do like
Love that.
happy hour or brunch or something fun. And then it's like more enjoyable and casual than like, okay, we're going to do this very buttoned up. Like, here's my attorney. If you send me 5 people, you get a gift card. Like, that's a little awkward. So it's just easier. And ultimately, it's a win for both parties, which is cool too.
Absolutely. Like you could, pair up with a center of influence and you have end of year questions and you answer 5 questions and they answer 5 questions and you're writing those from actual client questions so you know they're hot. People's minds are there. That's a great way of doing it. I mean, it's really similar to
Absolutely.
how we're teaming up here. We have really
Hmm.
similar client bases. We've worked on projects together. We have similar but not competitive expertise. And
Hmm.
and that's something you really want to look at. And so, yeah, I think it's wonderful. I think it's an amazing strategy. And the reality is, you know, I would rather see someone have a decent strategy with amazing execution than an amazing strategy with zero execution. People
Totally.
wildly underestimate the value in just like actually doing something and taking it from this is an idea to let me do this well and try to see how this goes with a few key metrics. Like it doesn't have to be
Follow through.
fancy. Even
Hmm.
even the firms that have big budgets, you'd be astounded at how simple some of their strategy is behind the scenes. And
Oh,
so,
absolutely.
keep it simple and yeah, absolutely.
Yep. One thing that I always remind myself when I'm thinking about marketing, and even this year, I kind of was feeling like we're doing 2024 planning, and I was like, oh my gosh, like there's so much I want to do. I want to do all these really cool marketing things because like I nerd out about that stuff. And I asked myself, okay, if this was easy, what would it look like? And the answer was,
Love
I need
that.
to be doing less. And like, I need to be focusing less on these big inflated numbers or whatever, right? The vanity metrics. And for the email list person, but honestly, for everybody who's submitted a question today or anyone tuning in, that's a really good motto to take into 2024 is think through, okay, if this was easy, if my marketing was easy, if growth was easy, what would that look like? And it may be like, 2 new prospects would phone me every Monday and they'd sign
Yeah.
by Friday and it would be fine. Great. What do you need to do to make that happen? Or if it's, I need to grow this email list because right now I have, goose egg subscribers. Awesome. What is your conversion rate? How many people do you really need on that list to convert and feel good about the ultimate goal, which is growing your business? And just think through
Yeah.
like, if things were easy, what would that look like in practice with my marketing? Because ultimately, you're gonna be more consistent, it's gonna be more sustainable, and people are gonna respond better to your brand and ultimately buy.
Absolutely. I love that. And I think that we all have that same challenge as we get really excited to do a lot of things. And the shorter you can keep the list, the better. Another thing to just kind of add on to that is when you do come up with these ideas, I've heard this term called an idea garden. So you just keep that list, in your project management solution in a Word doc and a Google Doc, whatever is good for you, and bookmark it in your browser. And it's like, all right, I have this idea. I'd love to do this partner webinar or reach out to this person and just put it on a list. And that doesn't mean it's a no, it's just a not right now. And so once you kind of move through a few projects, a few things you've tested, a few things you try, then you go back to the list and you say, okay, given what I've learned, given the time that I have available and the constraints that I know I have, because we all have constraints, what is the best next step from this list? And move through, actually doing and completing things versus just like, idea frenzy of like, oh, I have all these ideas. And again, like a
Mhm,
half-assed executed marketing plan that's actually executed, like
mhm.
ideas don't close clients. Okay, ideas
Yes.
just don't
Mhm,
close clients. It's putting something out there, it's doing something, it's shipping, it's sending the
mhm.
email, it's posting on LinkedIn, it's following up, and like that is what's going to move you closer to that ultimate conversation that's going to bring you a wonderful person that you can help. So I would rather you just get it out there and be scrappy about it. And I mean, you'll see it. Like I post stuff on like LinkedIn, there's typos and stuff. People are like, "Oh, you got some typos." I'm like, "Yeah, no, I'm just trying to get it out
I
there.
posted,
I
didn't
have
I?
all
Yeah.
data."
Yep.
Yeah,
Nope.
I
I had a
know. So
tennis
it's
coach
okay.
years ago that used to say it doesn't have to be pretty to get the point, right? Like it doesn't have to be pretty to get it done.
Yeah.
And I think about that a lot with my marketing because I mean, for better or worse, and like I had a
Gosh,
therapist call
yeah.
me out on this in the past because I'm a little bit of a perfectionist, and she had asked, "Hey, like, what's the theme of your business?" And I was like, "Oh, it's perfectly planned content," and she busted out laughing because she was like. Of course, like we're working on some perfectionist tendencies or whatever, and like your business
Right?
focuses on that's a value you have. And I think a lot of people focus on like, okay, like it needs to be this perfect way before I grow my email list, before I build the content calendar, before the strategy happens. But reality is like it just needs to be done. Like done is better than perfect. You can always tweak, adjust, and grow from there. But Kendra, thank you so much for being here today. I know you and I could probably talk for forever, but where can people find you if they're looking to connect?
Yeah, so it's super easy. One of two places. One is rebelmediaagency.com, and the other you can find me on LinkedIn and Twitter and Instagram. My handle is Kendra Rocks Life. I'm really easy to find on the internet. Just look for the rock and roll hair, and you'll find me.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Kendra, and thanks everybody for being here. Excited, and I'll include all of Kendra's follow-up information too in the email that goes out with this.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Thanks.